Yes, no, that's an excellent question. What actually happens when there is independent activity in the neurobiological social engagement system of the unconscious body-mind? The neurobiological social engagement system references the polyvagal theory. And within the neurobiological social engagement system, there are all these different roles, including emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, emotional well-being, physical well-being, rest and restitution, mutual support, cooperation, etc. And so there's different things that support your health in your body, your health with your emotions, your health with relationships, friendships and intimate relationships, everything. And so when all of that stuff is really connected and it has high vibrational content because of thriving internal attachment systems, because of fulfillment of those internal needs, and there's expansive connectivity throughout that information, okay, uplifted content and expansive connectivity throughout all that data, then everything is flowing harmoniously and with balance and equilibrium, you could say. Balance and equilibrium. There's balance between everything. There's not, one thing that's not tending to that need or being overly active, for example, okay? And so when there's independent activity, then what can happen, I'll give, let's say 3 examples, okay? I'll give 3 examples of what can happen when there's independent activity in the neurobiological social engagement system of the unconscious body-mind, where neural wiring connected with these roles might be providing navigation subconsciously without complete connection with everything else. And so before we dive into that, what is subconscious navigation? That's really important to understand. What is subconscious navigation? When there is when there is subconscious navigation, we are experiencing thoughts, feelings, and action patterns that are consciously observable. And we're also experiencing other components of subtle and implicit navigation that assist us through our moments. For example, if you go to a park that you've been to 100 times, the ability to go there and be like, oh, I'm familiar. I know that bench. This is the parking spot I like to park in, and I know where the playground is, and I know where the restrooms are, and I know where the field is, etc. That is a type of subconscious navigation. But if you've been to this park 100 times and then you go to this park and you're like, oh my goodness, I feel disoriented. I feel like I've never been here. I'm feeling lost and confused and, panicky and stressed out and anxious because I have no idea where anything is or what to do in this space that I don't remember ever seeing before. That would be a disruption of subconscious navigation, okay? So the ability to feel a sense of familiarity with a person, a place, a thing, a situation, an experience, taking a shower, brushing your teeth, walking barefoot, or putting shoes on, tying your shoelaces. The ability to just do these everyday things, it depends on neural content connectivity. So subconscious navigation is something that's observable directly through thoughts, feelings, and action patterns. Like, oh, I want to do this. I want to approach this. I want to avoid this. I'm feeling this emotion. I have this thought about something. Those are things that can be consciously observed. But then there's also subconscious navigation that can't necessarily be grasped that intentionally. You can't necessarily put it into words. But for example, the way that you gesture your hands, hi hand, thanks for being my example. The way that you gesture your hands or move your facial features when talking, or another great example is when posing for a picture. That's a type of subconscious navigation. Someone says, okay, everybody smile. Do you instinctively go to a specific posture? Maybe like there's different poses that people do, and when you go to take a picture and everyone's like, okay, cheese, smile or whatever, sometimes you're just like, okay, I'm smiling, but even the way you smile is a certain way. But if you're like taking a selfie or something, you might have a certain thing that your body naturally does to pose for a picture. That is also a type of subconscious navigation. So there's the thoughts, feelings, and action patterns we can directly observe, but then there's also a whole lot of other types of subconscious navigation that aren't as obvious, okay? So I got to understand what subconscious navigation is before we dive into this. So what happens? I love this topic. It's such a great question. It's such a great question. What happens when there is unique, independent activity in the neurobiological social engagement system? So we'll look at a couple examples here. You can explore more in my known documentary series. I think it was thesis number 6 that talks about this. But throughout the known part 2, through video series and text, there is mention of the neurobiological social engagement system and the different roles and kind of how they affect personal experience and all kinds of good stuff. So let's say, for example, that rest and restitution, which is a role in this system, and there's all this information from all these years of life, and all that information is organized to support navigation of rest and restitution, okay? If that role is operating independently, and in this particular example, it might especially be overcoupled with a regulatory protocol of a low energy autonomic nervous system dysregulation that can manifest as a dorsal vagal collapse. Okay. But when the role of rest and restitution is operating independently, then you might just want to rest all the time. And you might feel hungry all of the time. Even if you're not actually hungry, there might just be a constant appetite. And if you're not feeling inclined to eat, you might be just tired and you just might want to do nothing, and maybe you take naps a lot and sleep really long at night and sleep in the morning or something. And again, this independent activity may also especially be overcoupled, overly entwined, too many excessive low vibrational connections happening to cause a unique style of navigation and regulation through the unconscious body mind. The rest of restitution might be overcoupled with this low energy, so that the brain-body system and the regulation of the nervous system and stuff might actually be feeding this information that says you need to be constantly sleeping, or we have no energy, or in the intensive states like a dorsal vagal collapse, the unconscious body-mind is actually feigning death and going into a collapsed state that can manifest as just being fatigued all of the time. And this ranges along a spectrum of intensity, because on the super intense level, it could be like a dissociative blackout and just like traumatic sleep, basically. But to a less intensive degree, you might just feel very, very fatigued and tired all of the time. And maybe you have an appetite, but eating isn't necessarily satisfying, and you're tired all the time, but sleeping isn't necessarily satisfying. And so it's kind of this disruption of navigation regulation. And so if the role of rest and restitution is independently activating, then there's all this data connected with that subconscious priority that is the dominant place where navigation is coming from. And then you're not inspired to have any emotional or physical intimacy. You're not inspired to have emotional or physical health and well-being. You're not inspired to go out and have friendships and new adventures and experiences and exercise and, all these things that these might be connected with. So that's one example. Another example is if the role of emotional intimacy is being independently activated, then you might kind of have this subconscious reality where the top priority is emotional intimacy. And the unconscious body-mind is basically on the lookout for anyone in any situation to be emotionally intimate with. And that's where you might be, okay, I'm going to go be social. I'm going to go out. I'm going to meet people. And every other person I meet is going to be a potential emotionally intimate partner. Whether that's in like a romantic setting or like a best friend kind of way, there's a sense of emotional intimacy. It could even be in a parent bonding kind of thing. If you connect with someone who's maybe much older, the unconscious body-mind can actually have this sense of emotional intimacy in relation with, like a parent-caregiver type figure, which would be overcoupling of parent-child bonding and emotional intimacy being activated independently. But the unconscious body-mind will be like, oh, maybe that's someone I can be emotionally intimate with. And you might find yourself naturally sharing all of these really personal things about your life and just having this inclination to be very open, because emotional intimacy is the only navigational priority. And that's where you might find yourself jumping into a relationship or finding a new best friend just out of the blue. And maybe you don't really know much about them, but they're your new best friend. And so that kind of thing can happen if the unconscious body-mind says, hey, emotional intimacy is the top priority, and navigation is primarily stemming from this independent neural wiring that's related with this subconscious priority. And then on the flip side of that, or similarly to that, parallel with that, I guess, is if the role of physical intimacy in the neurobiological social engagement system is being independently activated, then the unconscious body-mind might be just straight up on the prowl to look for someone to be physically intimate with. And this can manifest in some unique ways, because it might not always be about finding an external partner. It might just be a very sensual or sexual self-presentation in the way that you maybe act or dress, or the types of experiences you are inclined to, like going to nightclubs or something. Just as of course one of infinite examples. And there's nothing wrong with any of these experiences. It's just a matter of expanding our awareness about what's actually happening so that consciousness has more power. Because when we take actions on neural wiring without questioning it, then the brain and body have unconscious programs that are determining existence in its totality. But once consciousness is like, oh wait, this is actually coming from my brain-body wiring, what if there's more? What if there's more than that? What if there's more than the automations? What if there's something greater beyond this thought? What if there's something even better beyond this automatic emotion? What if there's something even more wondrous and fulfilling and satisfying beyond this automated action pattern? But you'll never find that what's more if you act on those thoughts, feelings, and action patterns. Because doing that feeds the neural wiring, and that can restrict the expansion of consciousness. Because if consciousness is not the brain-body wiring, but it doesn't know that, then it's not its full totality. But if consciousness, the true essence of self, is like, oh hey, this is an automated projection of navigation and regulation in my unconscious body-mind based on how experiences that are no longer here are stored inside of me, what if there's something more to me, or more to my desires, or more to my potential than this automation, but I won't explore that until I take a step back from acting on the automation and responding to it, feeding into it, So anyway, yeah, there's nothing wrong with any of these things, and expressing all that we are is important. And, sensuality and all that, it's a part of the human expression, but it's about having it be in balanced harmony with everything else. And so, for example, if there's a suppressed sexual trauma, but there's independent activity of physical intimacy, then there might be these really unhealthy sexual projections or sexual relationships or inclinations, etc. And then it's just responding to trauma unconsciously. And that's not the true essence of the self. But it's hard to know that if you're in that experience and that just feels like who you are, just feels like what life is. And so that's something that can happen. The role of physical intimacy in the neurobiological social engagement system of the unconscious body-mind can become independently activated and be the primary place where the unconscious body-mind is projecting navigation from. And this can affect regulation because all those things that happen to contribute to sexual arousal, etc., can actually be automatically happening a lot more than maybe it otherwise would be, because the navigation is saying I'm just constantly in this state. It's the only subconscious priority happening right here. Okay? And so when there are this presence of those thoughts, feelings, action patterns, etc., that are inclined towards navigating life with an exclusive focus on physical intimacy, that can be a sign of independent activity in the neurobiological social engagement system, where there's all these different roles to provide balance and equilibrium and harmony and fluidity and all this stuff to the human experience. But then there's this one role, and suddenly all the information affecting navigation and regulation, or the way you think, feel, and move and navigate moments and make decisions, and how the brain body regulates along that journey, is only coming from this information with this one priority, and not taking into consideration all this other neural data and all these other parts of consciousness with all these other needs and desires. And then, so those are 3 examples: rest and restitution, emotional intimacy, physical intimacy. Another example would be physical well-being. Physical well-being. If physical well-being carries information in the unconscious body-mind that says, I need to, be on this diet and be in this exercise regimen to be able to be healthy and comfortable with my body, but that information is being activated without connection to any other thing, then all day, every day, the top priority, according to thoughts, feelings, and action patterns, and everything else happening beneath the surface, the top priority will be, I need to make sure I'm on this diet, I need to make sure I'm on this exercise regimen. And it kind of takes over reality. And that's where someone might be like, hey, to their, romantic partner, best friend, hey, I love you, but I actually need to go work out right now, or I'm actually in the middle of counting my calories or something, just as one of infinite examples, of course. But if the role of emotional intimacy tries to come up in this example, then the unconscious body mind's like, no, sorry, I'm really focused on this physical well-being stuff. All my navigation's coming from this data about how I need to eat and how I need to exercise to stay healthy and feeling comfortable in my body. And so I don't have time for emotional intimacy right now. I don't have time for physical intimacy. I don't have time for rest and restitution, because the unconscious body mind is experiencing this independent navigation where physical well-being in relation with a very certain diet and a very certain exercise is the top priority. But it's subconscious, and so it's hard to recognize in that moment, oh wait.